Hey everybody, welcome back to Geezer Rider. It is August in 2020 right now. The riding season for those who are able to participate in it is in full swing. Hopefully heat isn't too bad where you are. We've had some major heat waves out here in the mid-Atlantic. This is the third week of a heat wave where we're in the mid 90s with real high humidity. We've had some tornadoes blow through and severe thunderstorms. Been a mess, but hasn't, they got the roads cleaned up pretty quick, hasn't impacted riding too much. And I hope you're able to do the same. Wanted to do a quick segment without being too preachy on inclusiveness. This is not a political agenda or socialist movement, anything like this. If you go back to my very first video where I said the reason why I was starting this channel was that I thought that ridership was diminished. Our numbers were low, resulting in lower bike sales, fewer manufacturers being able to stay afloat, few newer manufacturers, and that goes for parts and accessories too, coming into the market, and just basically putting something that I greatly enjoy at risk. So one of the hopes that I had for the channel was people would see motorcycling not as a divisive activity, but as an inclusive activity. It's hard to say that, with some exceptions, that, when we're all out there on two wheels, we don't have something in common. And I think there's probably more that we have in common than we don't have in common. So what I wanted to talk about quickly was, what I think that should mean, what I think inclusiveness should mean, and then some of the benefits of it. Hey, if it, some of it comes down to just dollars and cents. So, from a involvement, I don't care whether you're purple, green, blue, male, female, somewhere in between, old, young, whatever. If you're out there on two, like I said in my opening video, I believe if you're out there on two wheels and you're acting sane, you're okay with me. Sane seems to be a pretty relative term for some people, but I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. And I don't think we can afford to, just rule people out wholesale. There are certain clubs and certain demographics that just simply don't want to associate with anybody else, and that's obviously their prerogative. We're all in this as our choice, but what I'd like to do is see us not go out of our way to diminish anybody else who's either already a motorcyclist or looking to get into it. And by that, I mean brand. I think I mentioned also in the first video, at the moment, I'm riding a Harley Davidson. I enjoy it greatly, but I have owned a large variety of Japanese bikes, for example, of all varying styles, cruisers and whatnot, tour bikes. So I don't think that rules anybody out. I don't see the need to put somebody in a box just because either that's what they're enjoying now, or that's all they can afford to ride right now, or whether their reason is for being on that particular style or brand of bike. Again, let's all be in this together, and maybe help one another. I remember some things about my Japanese bikes that may or may not be relevant to anything new, but maybe that knowledge could help somebody, and vice versa. If somebody was looking to change up to a Harley, I could give them the pros and cons. If they had a Harley and they were looking to go to a Japanese bike, I could talk to them about that too. The responsible riders from all brand and riding styles and motorcycle style segments shouldn't matter as long as you ride responsibly. And I see irresponsible ridership among all types. So, I don't think anybody's immune or say, I belong to this group and we never do any of that, because there's somebody out there who's not part of your social group or your riding club or what have you. But who rides that same sort of bike you do, or that brand, and they act irresponsible. And that leads me to behavior and social impact. So you know how every conversation goes when it comes to getting a motorcycle. The first thing is, oh, I know so-and-so and their kid got killed on a bike, or this guy broke his leg and never rode again, you know, blah, blah, blah. And on top of that, and the other day I saw this kid on a super bike going through, you know, an intersection, doing a wheelie in shorts and flip-flops and, you know, that whole nonsense. This stuff affects people, you know, they just want to ignore you and forget you're there when they see that sort of stuff. And that's not what we need. What we need is people to care about us and see that there's a bike on the road and remember where it is so they don't forget about you, you know, when you're stuck in traffic and you just can't get out of their blind spot. You want them to know you're there and to care that you're there. And if everybody's showing their backside all the time, you know, they're not likely to think that way. And they're obviously not going to have a pleasant conversation with their kids when the time comes about getting a bike or something. And that affects insurance, people's ability to get loans, you know, risk factors. You don't need to be the motorcycle police, but I would say, you know, don't condone that stuff. I mean, if you can afford the toy, you can afford to go to a track day and race. You can, if you can afford the toy and your bike is that big and bad, you can pay the fee at the drag strip and find out what it'll actually do in the quarter or the 8th mile. There's really no need for all that stuff on the street. And I know a lot of people are going to take that as preaching, you know, don't tell me how to ride. But basically, there are laws and there's common sense. You know, somebody very wise said, you can be right, you know, it's your right to do something, you can be dead right. And a lot of the behavior that I see that I disagree with, dead right is more where that person is headed. So you don't have to be the motorcycle police, but, you know, if somebody asks you about it and you don't think it's appropriate, just say so, you know, and let them know that there's a number of us that hold ourselves to a higher standard, and, you know, maybe we'll be looked at in a slightly more positive light. The economics of inclusion. So what we're looking for is to have more people want to ride, and there's a lot of barriers to entry for that. So there's enough of a hurdle just financially, the cost of a bike, the cost of getting all the gear. If you're somebody that rides with a helmet and, you know, even basic safety gear, that adds up pretty quickly. So you don't want part of the thought process for somebody thinking about getting into riding, or whether they want to continue to ride, being, am I going to be looked at as a social pariah, or, you know, just a gnat on the road to be dealt with because of the way all these other people behave, or the way people think about me, you know. So I remember being on Japanese bikes and people, you know, saying, oh, you know, that bike's no good, you know, well, do you even know what it is? Doesn't matter, it's a Jap bike, it's no good, you should be on such and such. And then I would change over to a different bike, and I'm like, well, I'm still the same guy, I still ride pretty much the same way. How have things changed, you know? So, you know, encourage people for where they're at, you know, in their journey of riding. If they're on a little 250cc, you know, import bike or something, and that's the best they can do, hey, more power to them. I don't make fun of anybody because they go to a motorcycle safety course, you know, to learn how to ride. You know, there's always, oh, I was 9 years old and I hopped on a 650 and never looked back. Okay, you know, good for you. But for the rest of the world, I want somebody to get some more formal skills under their belt if they're going to be out there riding next to me. So that's all part of inclusion. And one of the things we can do is, we've all got gear and parts sitting around that are just getting on our nerves, getting underfoot, using up closet space and everything. And not all shops or dealerships are doing this, but if you can, you know, join a riding club or some kind of group, or put your gear, either, you know, riding gear or your parts or accessories, on consignment at a dealership or a shop, that gives somebody with limited financial means a way to get what they need. So obviously helmets are a very personal choice and they have a shelf life. You don't want to hand somebody a 10-year-old helmet and say, here you go, you're going to be safe in this. That's bad advice. But the rest of the stuff holds up pretty good. You know, the protective pants, protective jackets. Again, boots are probably a pretty personal issue, but you could use somebody else's riding boot. You're going to be wearing socks, hopefully, so it's not like you're, got your bare foot in somebody else's sweaty boot. And that'll take some of the edge off the economic impact and let somebody just starting out get into it a little bit cheaper, or allow somebody to upgrade either the parts on their bike or their riding gear, or wear the gear that they want to or need to, but can't afford to. And the last thing we want is somebody to have just this easy little low side or high side and get more scraped up than they have to for the want of a couple extra bucks for some gear. So that's a way that we can help out. The other thing, and I've mentioned this in one of my other videos too, is there's always opportunities for motorcyclists to participate in charitable activities. It doesn't have to be some big grand gesture. You don't have to write a $50 check every time. Sometimes there's these little poker runs for $5 or something, and the proceeds go to a charity. That is all the stuff that we need in the news in place of all the normal, this guy ran from the cops, or, there was an accident at the intersection. And it's seldom that the first thought in somebody's mind was, what did the car do wrong? It's always, what did the bike do wrong? Or if they didn't want to accept the risk, they shouldn't be out there on the bike, those kind of conversations. So the more we can bring to the fore positive images and events, maybe hopefully get some of this stuff in the news, even if it's just local news, the better off we all are. So I hope that's a little food for thought, and the next time you have the opportunity to interact with somebody that's kind of outside your normal social circle, or the style of riding you do, or the type of bike that you ride, if there's an opportunity to strike up a conversation and just, have that, hey, we're both on two wheels type back and forth, instead of just sitting there arms folded with mirrored sunglasses on staring at each other. I think that would go a long way towards, people seeing us all getting along together makes the whole prospect of getting into motorcycling far more inviting. I hope you have a great time riding. Ride safe. Namaste.